Theater is a form of connection and communication, all centered around the art of collaboration. From the community playhouse and educational institution to the many regional theaters, on Broadway and in the corporate entertainment world, including cruise ships and industrial events, collaboration is at the heart of every show, every production. Collaboration is the blending of art and science, of creativity and the production process. It is the dance that happens when artists, technicians, designers, producers, musicians, marketers, and a wide variety of passionate individuals bring their talents together to develop a singular experience. Projects with Jason is one such collaboration seeking to inspire, educate, connect, and entertain through a series of unique, multifaceted experiences which seek to explore the wonderful spirit that is generated when professionals of all backgrounds and experiences intersect with rising theater students and educators, bringing together working professionals and talented students in a crucible of collaboration that happens when you put people together in a room and charge them to create something. The results are very special. This series of works is designed to enrich and inspire students, educators, artists, and all others as we look to connect, be entertained, and grow as artists and human beings.
I'm Jason Daunter. Join me and our Projects with Jason team as we explore the worlds of innovation, design, and all things behind the scenes of live entertainment. Designed to showcase key professionals and enable interactive dialogue between theater students and these artists. Hosted by Principal Lighting Designer for the Disneyland Resort, Casey Wilkerson. Casey is joined by two-time Tony Award-winning scenic designer, David Zinn. Mr. Zinn's impressive credits include SpongeBob SquarePants, The Humans, Fun Home, and most recently, Diana the Musical that was filmed for Netflix. Join us behind the tech table.
Hey everyone, I'm your host Casey Wilkerson, and welcome to Tech Table, where we bring students and educators together with notable backstage artists from across the entertainment industry. I'm super excited about this episode because we're going to explore both scenery and costuming with an exceptionally talented award-winning theater artist, David Zinn. And along the way, we'll be meeting a group of students who are going to engage in a design challenge with David. We'll meet a couple of educators who have some specific questions for him, and we'll take questions from you, our invited viewers. So just post those in the chat window along with your first name and where you're from, and we'll get to those toward the end of the show. So now, let's welcome from New York, Mr. David Zinn.
Hi, it's so exciting. I'm actually coming from Philadelphia, not actually New York.
Okay, sorry.
My husband and I have a place in Philadelphia, which is where I have rode out most of this.
Got it. Okay, so first of all, thank you for joining us. These episodes have been incredible to give educators and theater artists and students a chance to really connect and engage in a dialogue as opposed to just watching a Zoom thing or attending a workshop. And so we really appreciate you being here with us.
My pleasure, more than my pleasure. It's really great.
Okay, so I have a gazillion questions, so we're just going to jump right into this. So tell me a little bit about what high school David Zinn was like.
No, next question. I was just thinking, actually, high school David Zinn, I guess high school David Zinn was full of misconceptions about himself. My friend Jenny Schmidt, who's a wonderful printmaker who lives in Minneapolis, who was a real touchstone for me in high school. I remember my parents were conservative. I grew up on a little island outside Seattle. It was very beautiful. I remember my parents were, sort of like, I was born in California. They were like sort of California Republicans, which are like not psychopathic monsters, but kind of monsters. And but my parents were lovely and supportive of me. And I remember when I was in high school, 8th grade, I think I was still trying on maybe being a Republican. And my friend Jenny just looked at me. I said something at some point one day, and I remember she just looked at me and she was like, "You don't look like a Republican." And I remember just being like outraged that I was like, "How dare you?" But of course she was right, and I made the transition very quickly thereafter. I was a theater kid. I was a real theater nerd. I think when I entered high school, I still really thought I was going to be an actor. I was like to sing and dance and love musicals and I think that's so many people's way into it. But I was also, even at that point, doing some backstage work and really interested in that. And there was a teacher. We had a strong community theater on the island, and a sort of wonderful teacher. And we'll jump forward ahead to say, I was thinking about the Tonys just because they mentioned it in the introduction, and awards are weird and Tonys are weird and all of that stuff. But it was an awesome opportunity for me. One of the things that was so great about it was like a public opportunity to thank somebody who was very important to me, and I think a lot of people use it as that way. And I think given that chance, it was really great. Anyway, Susie, who was the director of what was a teenage repertory company on the island, really, I was able to kind of voice my design enthusiasms to her, and she really, she was one of those teachers that was like, "I see you, and I'm gonna help you. You seem really interested in this, and I'm gonna help pull that out of you."
Yeah.
And those people are magic, and she really changed my life and set me on allowed me to sort of noodle technically where I had no I had no right to be doing that. But she sensed my ambition and she sensed my enthusiasm, and she really kind of let me be me. Which was a real extraordinary thing.
So now before that, you said you wanted to start as an actor. Did that was that planted earlier? You saw shows or movies or plays or?
Yeah, I guess that's just the way that it's sort of. That's I think when you're young and you love shows, like that's, at least for me, that was like then I want to be in them. And right. I enjoyed it, to a certain extent. And my dad had been in the theater. My dad had worked as an actor and modeled and stuff in the 50s. He lived in New York for a little bit. He grew up in California and returned to California and did like TV a little, and then gave it up for a more sort of like a regular job, but loved the theater and so I think that obviously had that kind of passion from him, but I had it at a really early age. I was 7 and I wanted to be in a musical. So I was just like, you're awful. An awful child who's selling musicals all the time. And thought he could re-choreograph Fiddler on the Roof in his living room.
I directed quite a few of my friends in things that I'm glad were never filmed.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I was thinking, I was also just about this thing. I was like, it would have been like the internet would have been so, like, I'm so grateful that the internet didn't exist when I was young, because I would have put one of those dance numbers from Fiddler on the Roof online, so I'm so glad that doesn't exist. On the same token, this is such a wonderful resource, not that this episode will be such a wonderful resource, but the idea of what you guys are doing and just the amount of information that's available and the amount of people that you get to hear and voices that you get to hear.
Yeah.
I know during lockdown, it's been a huge boon for all of us to be able to listen to some sanity and so it's extraordinary.
Well, and to have something, we were all sort of like lurched into this situation overnight, and you've got when you're creative, you've got all of this energy that has to go somewhere. So all of us being quarantined, as you know, I'm an introvert, so I'm just like, I don't mind being at home.
I was like, cool, for 6 months, cool. Yeah.
But I have to sit here and do nothing, right? Yeah. It's like I have to do something. Okay, so you're going through high school and working there in the community theater there in Seattle. Did you, when you went to college, I mean, first of all, how did you make the decision that you wanted to go to college and what you wanted to pursue? And was that something that you were really laser focused on theater or what?
Super laser focused on theater. I knew somebody, or maybe Smithsonian had done an article about North Carolina School of the Arts. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Like school for art.
An entire school.
Yeah. I did a remarkably, as I recall, I love research, but I did very little, it feels like I did very little critical thinking about what I wanted to do with my future. So that seemed really great. But I remember having a friend of my sister's had gone to NYU to go in the acting program. And so I talked to her, when she was back on Christmas break and stuff. And so that was in my head a little bit. And then a woman that I was working with in Seattle at a theater in Seattle had gone through the NYU design program. So that sort of awakened me. And and at the same time, I also was like, that North Carolina seems like a great program, but also I live in a small town, live in a town of 15,000 people, and North Carolina School of the Arts is in a small town, and
sure.
I'm not sure that that's all I've been wanting to do is leave this small town and go to a big city. So maybe I should explore something in the big city. And so I applied to NYU, and at the time they did, you could enroll in the graduate design program as an undergraduate, which was sort of crazy. And it's the absurdity. I mean, kids are so smart now, but I literally didn't understand what a graduate program was, and I was probably too proud to ask my parents what it was. So of course I read it as a graduate program, and I was like, obviously I want to graduate.
Obviously.
I was like, I'm going to take that program. Seems dumb not to take that. So I applied to it, and I applied to it with this sort of weird idea. It was sort of like weaning myself off the idea of performing. And I sort of thought, well, if I'm an undergraduate, it's right in the same building as the drama programs, and maybe I could take classes and stuff like that. And I think I said as much on my application. So I got a call from the secretary at the time of the design department, and she was like, we're really we're excited by the things you've sent us, and we're, actively considering it. I just want to be real about the time that you're involved in being in the graduate design program. And I was like, yeah, that's probably good advice. And so I think with that combination and my sort of waning interest in being on stage, when I got to New York that fall, I mercifully was accepted, and when I got to New York that fall, that was my acting life, minus one very small production in New York, went away very happily. So I was then I was just and that's really kind of all I've done. So
got it. I started when I went to college on scholarship, and part of the requirement of the scholarship was that you had to audition for shows.
Right.
Wow. There's nothing to convince you that you want to work backstage like being on stage. And I'm just like, okay, I've done this, and that's good. I'm fine.
It's such a funny requirement for a show or for a scholarship program.
They wanted to really, they wanted to create, sort of well-rounded theater artists, and I get that. And the one thing, well, I took a number of things away from that, but one of them was I now have quite a bit of empathy when we're sitting there for 8 hours or 8 weeks sometimes of tech, and I'm asking an actor just to stand there and do nothing while I like them, and knowing just how mind-numbingly dull they think that is. And I'm excited because I'm working, and they're just making picture lists in their heads.
I will say that I've been lucky enough to be invited. I've been in the audition process a couple times, not for long stretches, but it's that is a humbling thing to watch. I was like, oh, I can't I mean, I knew that I wasn't really built for that, which is part of why I was like, maybe I should do, maybe backstage is a good idea.
Right.
But it's, I mean, watching that that takes a kind of fortitude that I don't. That is a personal well that I do not have.
Yeah, I would agree. So now, when you went to NYU, were you planning on concentrating on just costume design or just scenic design, or
both? I had always been really interested in both. I guess I technically was kind of a set designer first, and when I'd interned at some theaters in Seattle when I was still in high school, and that was always like as a scenic artist or as a working doing props or something, and so I guess that was sort of my way in. And certainly when I had work, when I worked even after college, my jobs were sort of like scenic art related. So I painted, but I was always really interested in clothes, and I entered that program assuming that I would, could and would do both. And
Got
it. Yeah. So.
And do you find, so I love that you mentioned that, you were doing some scenic painting and everything. Did you find that the first couple of years out of school were populated with work that was maybe, related to what you were doing, but wasn't specifically design work?
Yeah, I got very lucky. I mean, I got some regional jobs because I knew somebody from sort of my time in Seattle before. I got like my first job out of school was a little job at a not a little job, but it was a job at a regional theater, and which was exciting and involved, was still, that was 1991. So, they still spent money on costumes in regional theaters and it was period, so there was some, it was a small show, but it was really fun to dig into that. And then, my other, and I've said this before in other interviews or whatever, but, my kind of two real loves as a young theater maker were musicals and also the kind of Wooster Group-y super experimental theater. And so I started working with a company also that first summer right out of school called Target Margin, which is a off Broadway theater company which still exists, which was great. And so that was sort of like, but that really didn't pay any money, was really satisfying and a really extraordinary way to develop some of my skills. And I took John Collins, who runs Elevator Repair Service, did the sound for that show, and Rena Groff, who's a wonderful playwright, was in that show. And so that was a wonderful sort of nest of people. But I didn't, wasn't making any money. I fell in very quickly with a set designer, a guy named David Byrne, who ended up as the charge Scenic sort of ran the painting department at Hudson Scenic Studios.
Oh, okay.
At that point, he was a scenic designer, and I lived in Jersey City at the time, and he also lived in Jersey City. And so somebody that had working for him was like, "Oh, you should. Oh, Zinn, I can't do this, but Zinn can, and he's in Jersey City. Like, it's such an easy commute," and it was. And I ended up working with David, and we got on to a couple sort of architectural projects, doing the inside of what is now the old, but was then the new Skylight Opera Theater. We did the sort of mural interior painting of that stuff, and that led to a big residential project. So I had that as sort of like my kind of day job, ish. It wasn't quite that, but sort of filled in the gaps. And so I did that. I didn't really assist in the way that I did a little bit, but I didn't do like the kind of assistant route. Sure. I did a sort of caught the coattails of David and rode that project for a number of years, actually, which was great.
Got it. All right, so we have some students that we want to introduce you to. I can't even wait. This is gonna be fun. So let's meet our high school students.
Great.
First up, we're going to meet Chloe. Let's bring Chloe in.
Hi, Chloe.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Right.
A little nervous.
In your bedroom during the pandemic. How else could you be? It's nice.
No reason to be nervous, Chloe.
Absolutely. It's really nice to meet you.
Yeah. So next we're gonna introduce Emily. So Emily.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Emily.
Nice to meet you.
Emily wears her tech very proudly. I like that.
Yes, she does. Good girl. And then we're gonna introduce Jonah.
Hello.
Hi, Jonah.
There's Jonah. Awesome.
Portland, Oregon. Woo-woo.
Representing Star Wars. I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we've got Samantha.
Hi, Samantha.
Hi.
Wow, Samantha, what is there's so many things behind you.
Yeah.
Good heavens, I love it.
There's a Deadpool poster in there somewhere. All right, so you guys, this is David. David, this is our group of students. So for everyone watching, this is how this works. David is going to present a design challenge to this group. Once they receive the challenge, we're going to send them off to a separate video call with our producer, Jeff, to collaborate. And then we'll bring them back near the end of the episode to present their solution to David, to you, and to talk about how they came to their decisions. Okay?
Great.
So, David, what have you got for this group of victims?
All right. First of all, I will. What I would encourage you from the very beginning, and to meet any design challenge, but also meet this challenge, is you can't. You can think inside the box. That's also awesome, but you can't think too far out of the box from me. So even if ignore everything I'm going to tell you, or use everything I'm going to tell you. Just go where your mind goes. So when I was doing the SpongeBob musical, SpongeBob, Sandy, and Patrick go to a place called Jellyfish Fields. And it's on the show, and they like catch jellyfish, and jellyfish, I think sometimes are nice and sometimes are mean. But in the musical, it was like a place where they had to go to kind of like clear their heads, and it was sort of a relaxing, otherworldly place. And we wanted the jellyfish to be, kind of beautiful, and also they had to kind of dance around. There was a song. It was sort of, this is so funny. You can sort of see the Chicago ones on the upper, left of my screen, which aren't very fancy and which have big lights strapped in them. And then you see the Broadway ones where we decided they didn't have to light up, and we made them a little fancier. Anyway, so we ended up with umbrellas because at a certain point I just was like, umbrellas, like that sort of looks like and people we'd see, we'd like Googled like jellyfish, and people made them out of umbrellas, and we tried to use found materials in all over the set and stuff like that. So we ended up with umbrellas with little things hanging off of them, which was totally fine. But I was always wishing and hoping that I kept like putting it off because I kept thinking I was going to have some like other cool idea about how to make jellyfish, and I never did. So we made them out of umbrellas. So my challenge to you is that if you could, and I was going to say make them out of found objects, but I actually just think start from zero. If my challenge to you was, hey, there's a musical number and we need some jellyfish, and the only thing is that there's a sense of movement. They can be a costume, they can be projection, they can be a bunch of materials glued together. They can be paint. They can be, film. They can be a light. Use your imagination. I want to understand roughly that they're a jellyfish, and I want them to be able to to move around. And that is my challenge to you. And I would love them to not look like the lovely but slightly uninspired jellyfish I made for the Broadway production of SpongeBob, although they were beautifully crafted.
All right, so that is you guys' challenge. Do you have any questions for David before we send you off to collaborate? No questions? All right, so we're going to send you guys away, and we'll see you towards the end of the episode, okay? Woo! All right. All right, so I got to tell you, David, what I love about this challenge is it's based in something you weren't completely satisfied with. And as designers, I think we don't talk much about our failures, right? And Broadway.com wants an interview about the cool stuff. They don't want to hear about how dissatisfied a designer ended up being with, a particular paint color or a particular fabric or a lighting cue.
Right. And also as a set and costume designer, they usually end up taking a photograph of the thing that you're the most uncomfortable with. Do you know what I mean? Because you're giving it to the person or whatever, and it's like that's the thing that sort of just keeps showing up. I will say that I thought our jellyfishes were very beautiful and constructed by an extraordinary prop guy named Buste Bickley. But there's just it's like I did think I had a bunch of good ideas for SpongeBob, and I felt like the jellyfish were like a B idea. So.
Well, I mean, can you talk a little bit about how you handle a situation like that when something doesn't turn out as well as you planned or expected? How you deal with something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the job is obviously you want everything you do and every part of the job to be your mind-bogglingly best work.
Of course.
but sometimes it's not, sometimes it's late, or sometimes it's like it could be your mind-bogglingly best work, but also actors have to carry them, and so they have to be light, and they can't cost very much money because you spend it on other things, and so I always think of I'm very, I will say that I'm, especially lately, like I don't beat the drum of like going to graduate school or doing all that stuff. There's so many paths to this job.
Yeah.
But the one thing that is good about the graduate school experience that I had was the sort of just the mania of like having to do all those projects, one in back of the other, sort of got you good at, it got you good at making your plan B or C be kind of presentable, because you're never making those decisions in some sort of ideal circumstance. There's never enough time, there's never enough money, there's never any of that stuff. So you're sometimes you have to make a decision between 11 o'clock at night when you come home and 8 o'clock the next morning when you have to go talk to the painters and have an idea. And it's sometimes that's not going to be, that's not going to be like the world's most amazing idea, but it has to be a good idea. And that sort of that's a muscle, it's a muscle of just trying to sort of have confidence in your B and C ideas.
Got it. Okay, well, since we're talking about SpongeBob with the challenge, I'm curious about something I've heard you mention in that show. The set and the costumes should look like they were made from stuff that floated to the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
Can you? And I love that description, right? Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about that? How that design conceit came about?
Yeah, totally. That's a sort of loose rubric, because obviously, as many people pointed out, rubber balls wouldn't sink to the bottom of the ocean. But fair criticism. But that was sort of the ethos as we were building this world, which we were able to do over the course of, I would say, two very experimental workshops and one workshop which was a little more geared towards making what became the production. Just finding our vocabulary and how it interfaced with the cartoon's vocabulary and the rules of the cartoon, which were really fascinating and really interesting. We got some real time to think about that stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the rules of the TV show is that everything is made out of something that would have fallen to the bottom of the ocean. And, but they can monkey with scale in a way that sometimes we can't. If somebody's living in a lobster trap, like how big is the lobster trap and how big's the lobster, and
right.
Which is just easier to do when you can just draw the characters. But that was a kind of jumping off point, which was just the pleasure and the team has talked about this before, but the for us more the leaping off moment for our design was it's like the third episode or something, and SpongeBob and Patrick order a television set, and it gets delivered in a cardboard box, and they take the television out of the box, and then they don't watch television, they just play with the box all day. Like, that's what they were waiting for. And so that sort of thing, which is so, like what your imagination can like turn objects into. I feel like we tried to kind of approach every scene and every shift like now we're going to go to the jellyfish fields, and now they're this number's going to happen, and now this thing. So every kind of shift we wanted to underscore with a new exploration of what that could mean, introduce a new kind of material or look at a new thing in a new way. And in some ways, I feel like that's why I have a kind of question mark always about the jellyfish, which I felt like solved the problem. They looked like jellyfish and they moved around and they were really pretty and glowed. And they were an umbrella, I guess, but it felt like I was illustrating a creature as opposed to like fashioning a kind of new thing. And that's, it's, you can't win them all, but but otherwise I really spent 5 years thinking about ocean related things,
Yeah.
and water pool and water related things, and like what else and what you could do with them. I remember the day I was driving actually from Philadelphia up to my studio in Brooklyn, and I really used that drive. It's like an hour and 45 minutes. And I used that drive to just like space out, listen to music, and I mean, keep my not totally space out, but not talk on the phone. And I remember I was thinking we were trying to do this bandstand, and I was like, oh, I don't know what it should be, and is it a shell, and is it a whatever? And then I just sort of saw these surfboard. I was just to sort of imagine the surfboard sort of making that shape. And in the middle of this drive, and I was going to the studio to then talk to my amazing associate Meredith, and I was like, I have an idea. Like how big are surfboards, and what happens if we lay them out like that? And so it was just having the time to develop those, just to sit with those things, like tea really steep in the process is really was invaluable. And I think there's one of the things I'm proud of about SpongeBob is that I feel like there's a real kind of textural richness to it, which is only because we were able to sit with it for a long time, and the process of designing it took a long time. I also like texturally rich things, but it's just there's no way to do that, in a short process.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the great things about having sometimes the luxury of a little bit of time to develop. I think that there are maybe a lot of people out there that think that inspiration is like, oh, I'm going to go to a museum and be inspired today. It's like, well, it can work that way, sure, but more often than not, it's like when you're in your car or you're in the shower or you're in a meeting and you're just
showers are. I mean, if I didn't have showers, I wouldn't do nothing would happen. In my life. Showers are where I remember I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to do the, it's just, it's not, they're not that long. Like, I don't know what happened in that when I passed through that veil. But you going to museums is like filling your tank, right? Like that's sort of like an investment in the sort of future. I mean, maybe you're there for a specific reason, but I think you do those to sort of be filling your tank. And to build a thing, you're not gonna, the Caravaggio painting or the whatever isn't gonna pay off on the Sound of Music that you're doing, but it is gonna marinate in there, and that composition or that sense of light or something is going to come back to you at a moment. And so you just, your point, I've said this, before, but I think of the job of a designer is to be like a sort of the most interesting person possible. And so that's why you go to the museum. That's why you go to that's why you read. That's why you watch movies. That's why if you liked a movie, you watch all of the movies made by that person. If you like an artist, you read all the interviews you can find where that artist talked about the things that influenced him, and then you go figure out what all those things are. Like, that's a thing that I've been doing during lockdown.
Yeah.
And to just really be able to deep dive and soak into those kind of to other people's imagination as a
Well, it was interesting. A couple of years ago when The Shape of Water came out, Guillermo del Toro did basically probably 2 or 3 hours at the Cinerama Dome at the ArcLight here.
Oh, wow.
And we went, and he literally just walked out with his Mac and sat down and plugged in and was like, let me show you these sketches. And it was just a masterclass. And one of the things that he said during that really stuck with me was he was asked a question about the symbolism of something in Shape of Water, and he said, well, no choice is casual. And I was like, oh, that's just so, that really resonated with me, because it's like when you've done the research and you've got the background and you've got and your tank is full. Yeah. Then that getting to that choice may seem casual. Yeah. It's like, oh well, let's do this. Yeah. But the fact is that you've been building all of that up over the course of years. Yeah,
it's just being good at picking stuff. It's being good and facile with being able to pick things. Like that's literally all we do is like, yep, that, nope, yes, that, a little higher, no, right. Blue, and there's a room full of people that are like waiting for you to just pick stuff. Like, oh, that's a good cushion. That's not so good. Let me think about that one. I'm not sure. You've gotta you've got to have a well to draw from. And I think what's so exciting about watching artists talk about their wells is it's not that it's like it necessarily aligns with yours, but it's so fascinating. It just richens the experience by which you can make your own decisions and inspire other people.
Okay, so this question just occurred to me when we were talking about SpongeBob. I didn't have it planned, but I have to ask, what was your initial response to the phone call? It was like, so how about a musical about SpongeBob SquarePants?
I've gotten so many calls. I remember Alex Timber said the same thing to me when he called me about Rocky the musical. He was like, "How a funny idea." And I think everybody's. I mean, my idea was like, "Great, yeah, why not?"
Why not? Right? I mean, that's always the best response. Why not?
I fucking love SpongeBob. I don't, and also it was Tina and I had kind of circled around each other. She'd asked me a couple times, I don't think we really knew each other. She asked me if I was available for a project once, and I couldn't do it. And I really, I thought Tina was amazing. Think Tina is amazing. So yeah, I was like, fuck yeah. Well, why wouldn't I want to just spend 3 weeks thinking about putting a cartoon on stage with Tina? Sure. What else am I doing?
Sure.
It's those. There are few challenges to which my response is not like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So one of the things that sort of stuck out to me about SpongeBob was that, like you said, it's just so texturally rich, and there's so much detail in everything, not only the set but the costumes. Mm-hmm. And so those are two different brains. They're very creative brains, but it's like there's. So I'd love for you to talk about, and it doesn't have to be necessarily related to SpongeBob, but the sort of the similarities and maybe some of the differences between when you're designing for scenery and when you're designing for costumes, and do those change if you're doing a show that you're doing both, or that you're only doing one. I'm just sort of fascinated by what. Because they are like all of the costume designers that I know, and I only know one other scenic and costume designer, are just so deep into their thing, and to have somebody that is richly sort of versed in both is really unusual.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I really like clothes. I really am fascinated by costume history. I love beautiful clothes. I mean, I'm not on myself, particularly, but I love how people express themselves through clothes. I would say costume is a little bit more where like old actor me comes through, like the interest and the happily given, but the patience to go on that journey with an actor it's a really that's a really special journey, and it's really fun. Often, sometimes it's really hard, but I am a real. I mean, I love painters. Like I really love scenic painters, and I love watching that. I don't do it anymore because I'm not. I was like okay, but I'm not great at it. But I really love watching painters do their thing, and I really love being in a costume shop. Like that more than a scene shop, a costume shop really feels like home to me. Like I just like the scale of it's nice. I sort of understand how it really works, and I really love them. And I love I love picking fabrics. I love just like spending time with the thing on the form, just love the process of making the thing, and I would say it doesn't really change whether I'm doing scenery or clothes or both. And I think this is true. I don't think I'm lying, that I'm very happy doing any version of that scenario. I like doing both. It's really fun. I like doing clothes. I like doing scenery. Like I don't like. It's real. My interests are very deep and very real in both of those forms. And as long as I have the support I need, doing both is great. My costume brain is a brain I really love to get to spend time with that, because I really feel strangely, because it's not really how I started, but I really feel at home in a costume shop.
Got it. And do you find that when you're working on a show like SpongeBob, where you're doing both, I would assume that you have a number of assistants that you can rely on that are trusted collaborators.
Yeah,
that know really what you're going for.
Yeah, I think you have a great. I've had a series of great associates, both in my scenic life and in my costume life. And Sarah Lux was my associate, who's an incredible designer in her own right. Did the Band's Visit and the High Fidelity TV series, and she's amazing. And one of the things about an associate versus an assistant is, an associate is like the associate you want to have at that moment when Tina wants a decision to be made and I'm not in the room. You want your associate to be able to answer that question. Do you know what I mean? You want your associate to have the capability and the relationship with the director to be able to kind of be, I'm on stage doing something with scenery. She can turn to Sarah and say, hey, what about, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it's born through people who are great collaborators with me on that front. And who understand, they understand what it is I need to make the decisions in the time that I have to make them. So very lucky for that.
So I know that I think it was on The Humans. You've cited the work of German photographer Gordon Matta Clark as an influence for the Chinatown duplex in that play.
Yeah.
Are there any other artists, theater or otherwise, who have inspired or influenced your work, or that continue to?
Oh yeah, Jesus, yeah. Lynn Cohen, the photographs of Lynn Cohen for me remain a huge touchstone. She photographed sort of empty, sort of disused, not in a I see the Polidori book behind you, but not in a kind of Polidori way, but which are amazing. But she's the sort of banal space, priestess, which the photos are really amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Eggleston, I keep going to Eggleston's photos all the time. Yes, I have my own library of
Well, we were joking the other day when we were talking. It looks like we're actually sitting in the same place because we both have research libraries. Everybody
mostly. I'm not. These are mostly my husband's books. I'm not such a. I'm a better reader, but I'm a really if it has pictures, then I'm.
Yeah, same.
But I'm not a. Paintings for me, and again, it's interesting because I was a painter, but paintings for me have, with some exceptions. It's not a big. I don't spend a lot of time looking at paintings or looking at paintings for inspiration. I'm a photography person. Because I'm interested in real objects.
Yeah, for me, it's photography and film. I find to get a lot of influence from different films. There are some times that I will work on a project and I've done something and I'm watching a film that I saw maybe 3 or 4 years ago and I was like, oh, that's where I got that idea. Oh, that went so well, and I didn't know it was there, and I have stolen somebody else's idea without them knowing about it. So, okay, so I think many students who are interested in design believe that as a scenic designer, you're hired to create the plan and the drafting and the model and present it to the director, and then off it goes to be built, right?
Right.
So that covers the practical side of things for sure, but it doesn't really address the sort of artistic collaboration side. And when we were talking the other day, you talked a bit about why you believe designers are hired and what their real contribution is to the director and the production as a whole. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that because I couldn't agree more, and I think it's a great thing for students to hear.
Totally. I mean, I think that it kind of goes back to the sort of be an interesting person thing, yes, I get hired, especially when I do scenery, I get hired to think through the ground plan in a way that's going to do justice to how the piece moves and how things move in and out of the space if they move. But I also, and I'm turning my head because I'm staring at a huge picture of myself, which is it's me talking to me. Is it actually, this is so insane, but is it possible it's not possible to make that. See, even that's great. Thank you. Sorry. It's just so scary. a director hires you because you're going to do all the basic things that a set designer does, which is make a space for the play, make sure the drafting gets in there, like blah blah blah. And in some ways, like that's a big part of your job in the beginning. And then the piece goes into rehearsal, and by that point, you sort of what you've done is happening, being executed, and so then your job becomes to kind of safeguard that initial vision and be responsive to how the vision is changing. And so what happens in the context that we were talking about it was, at the point, the Minutes was opening on Broadway, I'd done another production, blah, blah, blah. I was in another tech. What is my obligation to the theater? Because my job was sort of done. I'd fulfilled my contract.
Yeah.
But my job kind of wasn't done because I was a set of eyes for Anna, the great Anna Shapiro, who was directing it, to just like look out for the things that we knew we wanted the piece to feel like and contain. And, a director has a million things happening. And one of the things that happens is they watch the thing all the time. And so, they need a pair of fresh eyes. And in some ways, especially the scenic designer, because in some ways the job is sort of the most done by the time you get into tech, it's being the eyes for somebody, being a dramaturgical mind for somebody, going away for a few days and coming back. And I that protecting their vision really becomes, which is sort of your vision, protecting the vision, I guess, becomes the thing that for me is really where my energy goes, and directors also talking, there's a thing where at a certain point in my life, and I'm sure you have felt this too, but there's a point in your life where you used to go to you do a show and then you'd like wait for your notes, at the end of rehearsal or whatever. And I just do my own notes. Like I have a list of things that I'm like, it's okay for you to check in with me and be like, are we ever going to fix that? Yes. We have a work call tomorrow. Don't worry. But I think when you're functioning at a level which I think sort of speaks of a kind of confidence that you grow into as a designer, you're just doing your own notes. You're like, I'm fixing that. Oh, yeah. That's not working. Like, I'm not waiting for someone to say, I worry about the jeans. Like, I know those jeans, I'm changing those jeans. And so I have a thing about note taking, right? Which is that when you give notes to other people, if someone asks you what you think of something, the thing is not to just say what's bad about it, but is to say what you've, noticed is maybe not working about it, but to have a suggestion about how to fix it. And so I feel like a lot of time once previews happen, and I'm talking at this point in kind of commercial context where there's a long preview session or there's a new work or something, but your job becomes to bring up to talk about those notes, to say, I don't, we really felt like this thing wanted to be slow, and I'm seeing these things happening and I don't understand. So I wonder if, maybe we need to pull this back, or maybe maybe it needs to get darker. You become sort of irritatingly, I'm sure, for every lighting designer I've ever worked for. I was joking with the great, amazing Natasha Katz. But she's like, I rarely see you. And I was like, no, you only see, and I sort of acted out my, I get up from the chair and sort of head towards the lighting table. But it's also because I want to be eyes for them too. I have thoughts about how it should move, and I'm not bossy about it, but I want to talk about the pictures that are being made, and usually as a set designer, you're in a slightly unique position to be able to sit back a little bit and stop your sort of immediate problem solving and be other sets of eyes for people. And it's a real pleasure for me. And I think that's, again, to get back to your question, for which I've taken a long road away from, I think that's what they're asking your eyes and your brain into the real.
Yeah.
And so there's the initial part of the journey, but then there's also continuing to be that to them through the process.
Well, it's interesting because when Natasha was on, we talked to her about one of the sort of frustrations of being an LD is by the time you get into the theater, there's a lot of work that's already been done on the set. It's there, the cast is there, there's probably some final fittings and everything, but costuming is, no one's done, but everyone is much further along than we are, and then you're just sitting down at the table with a theater full of people, and everyone's like, okay, go. Make some art. It's interesting because after we talked, I thought about that sort of like through the trajectory of my career, and I realized that there was that turning point. I did a production of Hair about 11 or 12 years ago, and the director had this very specific vision that he wanted to end the show with Claude and his number being projected across his chest that would then transition into his name. And then names would fill the wall behind him, becoming essentially the Vietnam Memorial. Right. It's a very somber way to end the show. Sure. But Let the Sun Shine In is not a somber song. It's sort of big celebratory. And so we're in tech. We're like in we're towards the end of tech, and we're working on this scene, and nothing is really working. And finally, I'm 4 or 5 rows behind him, and finally here, Wilkerson, what do you think? And I'm like, well, the image doesn't match the music. And he's like, well, the image stays. And I was like, but you can't change the music. And so we started talking about it. It was this great conversation about, can we have the band stop playing and the cast continue singing and take Let the Sun Shine In from a big celebratory piece almost into something that sounded like a hymn. And then he's like, oh, and if we did that, then I could take, I could peel the people off, and then that leaves just Claude, and then we could, and it became improv, right? It's probably the moment that I can at least recall that I transitioned from, oh, here's your lights, thank you for my notes,
right, to
I'm here at the in the room where it happens, collaborating with you, and you're not just hiring me to make your show look good.
Yeah, totally.
You're hiring me to make your show.
Yeah, we're making a show together, and your thing is the things that go up and down, and my thing is the we have departments that we have to report to, and workers that we have to keep busy and keep doing things. But yeah, no, we're really sitting in the room together, and it's really exciting. Those moments, you can tell when the director kind of is like, and everybody sort of gathers around the tech table,
right?
And it's like, what do we do about, fill in the blank?
Yeah,
and those are exciting moments,
Yeah, they really, really are.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has really stood out to me about your work is just the sheer variety of it. So I saw Amelie here in LA.
Yeah, nice.
Girlfriend at the Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
And August Osage County at the Old Globe, or La Jolla Playhouse.
Old Globe.
Old Globe.
Yeah.
And those 3 designs just really couldn't have been more different. I have to tell you, August in particular was stunning.
Oh, thanks.
I walked in with a director friend of mine, and the thing that stood out to me most about that design was the almost. I turned to him and I was like, I feel like I'm being smothered.
Yeah.
Like the weight of the unsaid that was suggested by the set and Jaffe's lighting and a judicious use of a little bit of haze.
Yeah.
Just suggested the sweltering heat, which led to this sort of like oppressiveness, and I was like, this is perfect. So I guess my question is, do you intentionally seek out that variety to work in like wildly different ways?
I think I'm like a 3-trick pony. Like, I'm not like a 1-trick pony, but I'm like a 3-trick pony. And I think you found like 2 of those tricks. You know what I mean? Like, to me, Girlfriend actually and August Osage County are very related in that it's August Osage County. Sam and I just wanted to. It was like, well, we should just get a house and put it cut off the front of it, put it in the theater. And so we couldn't do that, but we just made one. We went to Oklahoma. We like went around neighborhoods. We like found the outside of a house. We couldn't go into it, but we deduced the architecture from the outside. And then I just tried to recreate that house and that sense of you know, that play starts with this, you know, the idea that she's like taped up all the windows with black plastic and stuff. It's just like suffocating this family.
Yes.
I'm glad that that's what you felt. It was really fun. And girlfriend to a certain extent was just a, you know, a kid's bedroom like plunked in the middle of it, which sort of became the orchestra pit. And then I guess I did so many iterations. Was that up against, that was just stuck inside a big drive-in screen or something?
There was so the back wall was like metal, and there was an inset, which is where the band was.
Yeah. And that was the kid's bedroom. Yeah. So that's, to me, that's just like taking real spaces and situating them in basically empty theaters, which is a thing that I like to do. And finding some sense of finding a sense of collision with the way that those spaces talk to each other, you know, which I think by which tension is made and then the space gets, you know, is charged in some way.
Well, and that's the thing that struck me about Girlfriend, was that it was simple but not. I mean, it was like you could while there weren't a ton of elements, you could read certain things into the elements.
Yeah. I also really like to make. I just like to make a space for people to fill in meaning, you know what I mean? As opposed to like, just like, burr, burr, burr. But here's some elements that are going to respond to each other, and you fill in the stuff, you know? I also like, I'm a real, I trust lighting designers. I really love lighting designers, and I love light. And I like to build in as much possibility for light to sort of be alive, whatever that means. Sometimes that just means dimension, sometimes it means build, you know, but I was joking with somebody. I was like, I just am making a thing for light to hit, and that's basically what I'm doing. You know? It's just like toning. I'm making a container that light's going to be in and hit, and that container has to have the right emotional temperature or right flexibility for the event. And so gauging what that temperature is my job.
Yeah.
And Amelie was just Amelie in a way is a little bit more like SpongeBob, which is like a color, you know, like junk painted a color, which is one of my other tricks. Yeah. But that was just like nice French junk painted a color.
It wasn't junk.
Yeah. You know, those are, you know, Diana in some ways is similar. It's blue, which is a color I use a lot, but also they're, you know, those are shows that don't have enormous budgets but need to feel like a lot of things are happening and need some support and need some sense of transformation. Sure. And so building that into the unit, they're essentially unit shows, you know, is what those things are.
Got it. So, I mean, like most Broadway designers, you're typically, you know, working on multiple shows at a time, right? So hopefully one of these days soon, when we can get back to normal. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage the sort of the logistics and the demands on your time from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, I'm a super good compartmentalizer, which I think you have to be. In order to do the volume of things that can allow you to make a real living, you have to be really good at turning, like, okay, now I'm doing this thing for this time. Okay, that project is done. Now I'm doing this thing. This project is done. Now I'm doing this thing. You know, over the course of 20 minutes or a day or a week, just really good at kind of being able to have real clear focus and then move that focus clearly to another thing. Got it. And that's, you know, I'm just that kind of a person, which, you know, has also emotional implications for my partner, which sometimes is frustrating. But I would say if you're in a relationship, you have to have a very understanding partner.
Yes, that is very true.
Understand that your brain's not always in the, you know, at the moment that you're both physically together in. It's hard. You know, it's not hard. It's not coal mining hard. But it's mentally taxing. And you know, one thing that you really, I think, also have to do as a designer is have some real time to dream, like some real dreamy, like daydreamy time. And so you also have to build that in and protect yourself so that you can have that, just noodly alone time, unproductive alone time, as well. It's hard, it's hard.
And we touched on that a little bit on Friday about how there's a lot of discussion about how we make theater, and are 16-hour days really the best idea? And
no is the answer. Yeah.
Is working 6 weeks in a row with 10 hours of sleep each week probably the best way to run your life? So, but I totally get what you're saying. You and the thing is, ultimately, that's our responsibility as designers, right? We're the ones that have to create the wall that says, no, this is my time, and it's not, and frankly, it's none of your business what I'm doing with my time, because it's mine. And you do really have to protect that. So I want to talk about, I was fascinated by some of the pictures that you sent of the models. So I want to talk about just a little bit. Do you, as you're approaching a model, I have a couple of different questions. First of all, do you view them as a way to sort of practically work out the ideas you've drawn or thinking about, or is it more about like selling the design to others?
It's both things, I think. I like the SpongeBob ones just because it was such a the first one, the one that's like mostly doodles, those with blue and the white, is really like where we started. Sure. And then that's a sort of development into Chicago. The most finished model was a Chicago model. I think of them as both. I think for me, scenery, because it's space, I have a hard time drawing it. I mean, I can do little doodles to like remember an idea about a ground plan or something, or try to just, doodly things. But I don't draw scenery. I go right into a model. And sometimes I will take that model and like take photos of it and Photoshop, changes or fit light or whatever. So it's a real tool for me, and lots of designers work different ways, but I work very closely with my associate Tim, who and we work in a model together, and he does other things for me as well, but often he's just like making, from very rough, we'll sort of sketch some things out in a model thing, and I'll go look at it and, let's try this and go away. And I for myself, I I'm not a great model builder and like an okay model builder. And so I just get really frustrated with my own lack of ability as a model builder. And so just rather than having my frustration be the obstacle to working, just have somebody else do it for me so that I can come and look at it. And then, Tim, who's a much better and much more patient model maker than I, can deal with that.
Yeah.
But also, you're selling an idea, and so it's not. I definitely have done shows where the model, the SpongeBob model was like fun, so it had kind of its, whether we were lighting it or not, it definitely had its own sort of life. And the minutes is such a kind of like stoic space that it also didn't require like a ton of manipulating. But I've done shows which are dependent on light really transforming in them, and so then when I'm just like selling them is when they sort of get into Photoshop and light them and sort of try to give a sense of the kind of journey that they're going to take once light really gets into them, because you can light a model, but you can't really light a model. So.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that I think is interesting from especially from a student perspective, because I think there are some people that have the misconception that there's one way to do this. There's one way to go about designing a show, and the reality is some people work in like CAD 3D or Vectorworks, and that's their preferred thing. And some people start, building with a model, and some want to spend time doodling and doing their own hand drafting. And right. I think the second companion piece to that I loved hearing you talk about was acknowledging either what your, it's like you said, I'm not the best model builder and Tim's a better model builder, and being able to recognize that as an artist and go, this person is going to do this more justice than I am.
Yeah.
And take the ego out of that and go, because I want the best thing for the show.
Yeah. And I
want the person to do it.
Totally. I mean, I'm not precious about any of the costume sketches and models and stuff like that. I don't save them really. And I don't like, I try to not be precious about the things that you use to sort of get towards the final product.
Okay.
For me, the thing I think that is worth keeping in mind is what does your director need? Like, what does your director need to look at so that they feel comfortable understanding what it is that they're getting into?
Sure.
You know, like that's and usually the model is the sort of the safest way to make sure that everybody's agreeing to the same thing.
Yeah, that is true.
You know, it's like that's, I mean, because I've been around a lot of shows and seen a lot of things lit up, I'm pretty good at giving a realistic sense about how things will be lit. But so I feel like I'm not lying to them in Photoshop particularly, although you can certainly like sweeten the picture in a way. But I think, but ultimately the model is there to help you and the director come to a place where they can start rehearsals in a space that they understand as much as possible. And
Sure.
and reading models is a hard thing. You know, it's a particular skill which I think we do naturally very easily, but not everybody has that skill, and really good directors don't have that skill. And so trying to get a sense, this is where like being in kind of repeated relationships with people, you know, like, oh, it's he's signed off on what the model is, but I know this is going to be a problem for him, so I should make it clear in this exploit, you know.
Yeah. That's been one of the more interesting transitions in the lighting world over the last 10 or 15 years or so, because we used to have to rely on maybe some sketches to present what we were thinking, but it was mostly verbal. We would talk about what we were going to do, and now when you can bring things into 3D and render them and everything, there's sometimes that's great, but it also sometimes really sets you have to be, I think, really careful, because it sets a false set of expectations.
Yeah.
When you walk in the theater, the producer's like, that's not what that cube looked like in the rendering. It's like, well, but that's an idea. That's
yeah. I mean, I really use renderings too, and scene by scene things, especially for like a musical. This was true with Diana, also kind of true with SpongeBob, but I use that. I mean, Natasha and I really use those as a way to kind of talk through the different, like, how we would, as a springboard for how we would sort of approach those things. Because Natasha's not a big, like, Photoshop-y, rendery person.
Sure.
She's a talker, and her work is so amazing, and her body work's so amazing. Everybody just trusts her to do a great job. She's a thoughtful, intelligent artist, and so she talks very beautifully about light. But I was, in a way that was a little surprising to me at first, but nice, which was like, well, let's just use these as the jumping off point. And then we changed them whenever we needed to change them. And,
Sure.
she invested them with, a zillion times more beauty than I was able to. But
Alrighty, so we have got two educators that have some questions for you. Before we get to them, I want to remind everybody all the members who are watching the live stream, we are going to take your questions also at the end. So if you go ahead and send those in, just put them in the chat and your name and where you're coming to us from. So let's go to our educators. First up is Randy. Let's bring in Randy.
Andy,
hello. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
Great.
So, what you got for us today, Randy?
Well, it doesn't matter what you're designing, whether it's sets or costume. What's the beginning of your process? Where do you go to first to find your inspiration?
That's a good question. It does, and that it changes actually depending on what I'm doing. But I would read the play or listen to the music or do whatever the event is. And I try to have a conversation with the director as quickly thereafter as possible, so that I'm not dreaming an event. So I feel like I'm dreaming an event related to the event they're imagining. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's usually my first stop is like read. Obviously, you have the impulses you have, and you follow those. Sometimes I get on Google and like, or this photographer is exactly this world or whatever. So I have something to bring to the director, but I try to have that conversation pretty early so that we kind of launch the project in a similar place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything different in your approach when the play is set in realism, like Doll's House 2, or as opposed to SpongeBob?
No. I mean, SpongeBob is obviously, once we sort of decide that like, oh, we're just going to do the clothes, the Dollhouse Part 2 clothes are just going to be, they should just feel like the clothes. That's a quicker journey to the research than like, let's make up a world. But in some ways they're sort of the same conversation, which is you just have a sense about, you have a conversation about what the vibe is, for lack of a better word, and then I feel like that's where my brain can go do its thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy. So next, we're going to introduce you to Kaz. Let's bring Kaz in.
That's a great name.
So Kaz, even though she's a teacher at Beverly Hills High School, tell us where you're contacting us from.
Well, I went home to my retirement home in Costa Rica on the Nicoya Peninsula, Santa Teresa, Costa Rica, on March 11th for 10 days before we were set to open Chicago.
Oh my
and I have not left.
Wow, good work. You made the best plans.
Yeah. Yeah, I was joking with Kaz earlier. I was like, okay, if you're going to be stuck someplace for 6 months, there are worse places.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
so what's your question for David?
Well, we have a rapidly changing world.
We do indeed.
And there are so many questions about how we're going to return to any type of normalcy that we absolutely have to be thinking outside the box. What do you see as the future for set designers?
I mean, I don't know. I think probably younger people than me are going to come up with that future and dream that future, and I'm going to be excited to see what they find. I've seen some of like the sort of now that we're in this for a while, some of the things that are sort of happening on Zoom and being streamed and stuff, and you can see that people are starting to play with the form and what you can do with a camera. I hope that it's thrilling and it's out of my imagination, because I feel like my imagination is like, I can't wait to get back into a theater. And I think that will be a part of the world still. But to answer your question really honestly, I don't know. And I want to be wowed by something and look forward to it. I think it'll happen. I just really look forward to it.
So would you encourage set designers right now, young set designers, to maybe diversify and start learning some coding or?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Also just like be of your time. You know what I mean? Like I'm a 51-year-old guy who, went to school hand drafting, and I'm sort of my time, but I carry a particular history with me, and I'm ready for that history should change. And obviously, I didn't have the internet when I was out of college, and now people have the internet from when they're born. And so, yeah, of course you should be making an event which exploits the dimension of every tool we have, for sure. Yeah. Don't put something in a dumb old theater just because you think that's how people did it before. For sure.
Just as a side note, we had a Beverly Hills alumni, very recent alumni, who was in the touring company of SpongeBob.
Oh, nice. Who was that?
Well, it was Tristan McIntyre.
Oh, gosh. That's so great. It was so sad that tour got cut short for them. That was
yeah. Tristan hit LA with the set and his costumes and his crew ready to go. And we were all ready with our tickets.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. That was such a great company.
Tristan did come in and do a big old Q&A with my kids in the spring.
Oh, great. Very cool.
That's good.
That's so great.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, enjoy Costa Rica.
So Katz brings up a couple of interesting things. It's like, I mean, none of us know where any of this is going, what the future is going to look like. And you, so my understanding is you were working on Diana, right? When everything sort of poofed.
Yeah.
So first of all, can you talk about where you were in the process and how you guys reacted to what was going on in the moment?
Yeah. Oh, look, Diana. That's like a tech shot, which is why it's loopy and there's and this is I'm just showing you how brilliant Natasha Katz is. I was we were in preview 9, so we were sort of locking down the show. We had like another solid week of kind of preview rehearsals where we could make big changes before we needed to freeze it.
Yeah.
And for the press, so that they were, we sort of stopped making changes. And it was so weird. I know March was so weird for everybody, but it was so weird because there was like that we all got sent home on a Thursday afternoon, but we all knew what was happening sort of starting Tuesday, and we knew that somebody at the booth, which was just down the street, which some of our people were like working on that show, like, so we just knew it was coming. And or something, something was coming.
Yeah.
So we were in an afternoon rehearsal. Everybody was pretty sure we weren't going to do the show that night, but we were rehearsing. We're like, okay, well, I guess we'll just rehearse. And but we knew that all the producers were at a big meeting at the Broadway League was sort of hosting all the producers of shows that were running. And our producers came from that and sat us all down and, told us that we were going to go home that afternoon and that we weren't going to be able to start performances again until April 14th, which was just March 12th. So it was just, that was like such I just remember and I was so irritated because I knew that all this stuff was going down. I knew there was, I was so mad that we were being in the theater because but when we had that meeting, it was a real sense of like, oh, this is a family. And April 14th was not a date that surprised me, but it was definitely a date that surprised a lot of people. And to hear the kind of collective gasp of that was really heartbreaking. And we just had no idea what really was in store for us. Nobody did, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. A lot of people did. But we didn't. And so we left, Natasha and I went to the bar next door and had a drink and
good, which was the right response. So what can you tell us about future plans for Diana, if anything?
What I can tell you is it's been filmed for Netflix. Okay. It was filmed over the course of a week, basically, and it was a crazy. I got a call in July that this seemed like this was maybe going to happen.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was, there are some silver linings to the lockdown, especially when you're making a new musical. And one of the things that had happened was we knew there was work that needed to be done in the beginning part of the show, but we sort of identified the problem, but we didn't know quite how to fix it. And I think we were like, ooh, like, are we going to have some time to really, are we going to have the time to really do what we need to do to kind of give our final push to a show that we were, super proud of. And so, then we had a break. And the creatives did that work. They did incredible work. The writers and directors and choreographer and, met weekly during the kind of early part of the lockdown. So in June, we'd had a kind of read through of the new sort of beginning 20 minutes of the show. And at that point, there was like a teeny rumor, like the word filming had been used in a like don't say anything way, and I just didn't know what that meant. Really. Anyway, so Netflix came and filmed the musical. What it meant was that we had to spend the first week, in addition to all the bubbling and all the crazy medical stuff that they figured out and was amazing. And I'm very grateful I wasn't in charge of.
Right.
We had to first tech the new show. First of all, we had to make sure that the show, after sitting dormant for 6 months, like stuff still went up and down.
Yeah.
Then we had to kind of tech the show, because assuming we get to come back and open it, which is at some point, which is very much the plan, we want this, we need the new opening in it. And so we did that first for about a week, and then brought the cast into it and reteched it, and then sort of walked through the show again, because it had been a long time since anybody had done it. And then we filmed it the following week. We filmed it, and it was really exciting and thrilling to be back in that building. And I think I mentioned to you, but on some level, it was like it felt like March 13th. Like we all were like, "Oh, we're back! Oh, of course we're back!" And it's no, we're just doing the thing we did. But also it was also very uncanny and very strange. It was we had to wear stuff to be safe and keep the cast safe and all that stuff. So it was also sort of like being on a spaceship, and but it was a really extraordinary experience. One of the things I think that I didn't talk about emotional compartmentalizing. One of the things that I didn't really factor into in leaving that project so on the 12th, March 12th, just so like, okay, well, let's get out of here.
It's so abrupt.
So abrupt, and also in such a just like you're in like you didn't know where it was coming from, and so you just want to get out of the building. But that was a show. We built that show. That was a family. That was a process we were in the middle of, and so coming back to the theater, it wasn't really until I was like in the theater, and I was like, oh, I also like we get to put this to bed properly, because it's obviously going to go back to sleep now for, Sleeping Beauty's going to go back to sleep for as long as it's going to go back to sleep. But now we can do it in a way, like we never got to do that. We just we just walked out of the building in disbelief, and was, worried about your family and worried about what was going to happen. And so really having the ability to, not only for the kind of Broadway community to get to do our thing again, because we felt like we sort of had everybody's, in a nice way, sort of we had everybody's back, sort of doing it. It felt like we were doing it for us, but also for them.
Yeah.
But also just to be able to say goodnight properly to it until we get to see it again, which had a bigger emotional toll than I would have imagined.
Yeah, I think that's to have worked on a number of shows, and to have them sort of close without you, or be suspended without you, or getting to see it one last time. It's just another weird layer of all of this craziness.
Totally. And I'm very like, I'll walk out like I'm the second I'm done with something, I'm usually like, bye. Like I don't go to the opening. That's also I think why I wasn't really thinking about that. I was like, leave the theater early. Like that's my middle name, but it's the suspended thing, which was really strange.
Yeah.
And so really nice to resolve that. And really fun to film it, actually. And it looks great.
Well, and I think the thing that I'm hopeful for is when you see, when you look at something like how they filmed Hamilton, which is very different than the way they filmed something like, Into the Woods or Sweeney Todd back in the day.
Right.
Hamilton felt much more cinematic, more filmic. I guess what I'm hopeful for is, after a show has had its Broadway run for a number of years, and it can be put on film to the streaming platforms that can reach far more people, and I guess I'm hopeful that what that does is somebody who doesn't normally think of theater sees that on whatever platform it's on and goes, and then it comes through town, and they may go see that. I guess I guess that's what I'm hopeful for, is that this doesn't minimize people's interest in theater, that it actually may make it grow. Yeah, a financial incentive now for producers to do that.
I think that's been a paradigm shift that has finally been made in the heads of people, which is like, oh, this doesn't take away from our audience,
right?
It adds to our audience.
This may be value added.
Capture some things, which is lovely. But yeah, no, it's if you love it, you're going to go see it again, and that's
Let's hope. Okay, since COVID wasn't the only thing that has happened since we ended season 1 of Tech Table, I want to talk a little bit about how theater impacts changes and is sort of influenced by society.
Mhm.
So going back a bit, you were involved for quite some time with ACT UP.
Mhm.
And to give some of our younger viewers a brief history lesson.
The
So
last pandemic we had.
ACT UP was formed in response to social neglect and government negligence and the complacency of the medical establishment really during the 80s as the AIDS crisis was beginning to steamroll through the gay community. And they're a nonpartisan group of individuals united, quite frankly, in anger, right? I mean, that's where it all started, was a bunch of really justifiably pissed off people. And committed to direct action to end the AIDS crisis, which, by the way, kids, is still ongoing. So I don't really know what my question is, but apart from the sense of community that ACT UP can provide, I'm curious: did being involved with them alter your thoughts on theater making? How it can maybe be impacted by external forces like AIDS or societal stigma surrounding it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I am probably not smart enough to really plumb the depths of it. I will say that I got to ACT UP because of The Normal Heart. When The Normal Heart came out, I read that really galvanized my I think nascent activist brain, because as I was saying earlier, I thought I was a 14-year-old Republican. So I very quickly, my coming out and my experience as a young gay person was only centered around, was a death sentence. I mean, it was just like, not only are you gay, but if you have sex, you're going to die.
Yes.
And
yes.
That was an intense way
death
come to your own sexuality. So I'm still unpacking some of that, but that sense of the Larry Kramers, who wrote The Normal Heart and who was seminal in founding ACT UP. Larry's sort of righteous anger was something that really resonated with just who I am, which is I have that energy, and it's like the Clash, right? That's like anger is an energy, but I believe really deeply in a kind of sense of righteous anger, and theater. Is like a living room where like this man's unhappy in his marriage and like, man, she's sad. And, so I would say theater is like, can be profoundly unresponsive. And I would say American theater probably, this is a generalization, but certainly as I was becoming an adult and into my, the beginning part of my career, I would say it was reasonably unresponsive to the world around it. With huge exceptions, right? And Laurie Parks being one of those enormous exceptions, Tony Kushner being one of those enormous exceptions.
Yep.
I think what you're talking about is the sort of explosion with the murder of George Floyd, the sort of awful and frankly happy explosion of this of a kind of rage about racism and racial inequity in this country, and it has finally penetrated the consciousness of the theater. And this incredible document, We See You, White American Theater, was released in June or something, and it's an extraordinary, generous, very beautifully, I was going to say it's a hard document, but it's actually not. The thing that's so beautiful to me about that document is that it's very easy, which is just like, stop being racist.
Yeah.
And, white supremacy is in the blood of American theater, and we would like some less of that, please.
Yeah.
And so it's been a really galvanizing moment, and born of this pandemic, people have had the time to sit with ideas that, to your earlier question about everybody working so hard and not having time for yourself,
right?
We sort of necessarily haven't had. And right, so capitalism's main tool is to keep you so busy that you're not thinking about how shitty your life is and how slave to your labor you are. So so having a little space to be able to sit with some of these ideas has been a really inspiring moment.
Yeah.
And hearing theaters have a real conversation, beginning to have a real conversation about what it means to reflect a global majority on their stages, and to make it is thrilling. And I would say that the same kind of righteous anger, you never have to justify anger, to me, especially about something like somebody being murdered by the police,
right,
or racism. Perfectly reasonable things to be super, super angry about. That kind of righteous anger, feeling that energy, to me is really exciting, and I'm trying to do the best I can to support that.
Well, and I think we got to. I think when everybody started doing the colorblind casting, I think there was this sort of general sense of, oh, well, we've solved it.
Yeah. Right.
And it was like, well, in retrospect, it's like that was a great step one. So now we have a little time to maybe imagine what the next 99 steps are.
Yeah.
that speak to not only who's on stage, but who's backstage, and who's writing, and who's producing. And it's coming from my perspective, I've worked for the same company for a number of years that has, in my observation, a genuine commitment to diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of project teams that I've been on that have had, it's like the old school Benetton ad, and that team has created, and sometimes has the potential to create, far more interesting works, because there are different ideas, there's different cultural backgrounds, there are different opinions, or different perspectives, different viewpoints. It's ridiculous for me as a white guy to sit here and go, oh, well, I understand that experience. It's like, no, I may be able to relate to parts of it,
right.
but I've not. You have to be able to step outside of your own experience, but unless it's really happened to you, that's hard. And to have those voices come into the theater and be welcomed with open arms, I think is so long overdue.
And just be the theater. You know what I mean? That's where it's just like, just be the theater. Like, I don't know. Just great. What I was saying to the woman in Costa Rica, I was like, I don't know how to do a set on Zoom, but I'm a 51-year-old white guy. Like, I don't know. I don't need to know. Somebody else do it. Great. It's going to be great. It's going to be so exciting. I saw a really beautiful talk with Maria, the great Maria. It was a bunch of people, but Maria Goyanis who's at Woolly Mammoth. She was like, her kind of articulation to young theater artists, which is like, we know you're coming, and we can't wait to see what you make. Like,
yes.
It is. I feel really passionate about that. Like, I'm not going to fix those things. I can do the thing I do fine, but the world's changing, and it should change, and it should reflect who's in it.
Well, and isn't it weird how I don't know if this is your experience, but mine through this has been, it's like you maybe get to a certain point in your career where it's just like, okay, I know what my skill set is. I know what I can offer. I know why a producer is going to call me. But the reality is there are things that I'm right for and things that I'm not right for. And maybe it's time for somebody half my age to start doing those sorts of things.
And not my color. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And that's the thing. Instead of feeling like a dinosaur or that I'm going extinct, I'm excited about the prospect of what that means for us as theater makers in general.
Yeah. I think about the art. You want the art to be as exciting, and I hate the word diverse, but you want the art to be. I am the most excited when the art is outside of my experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's a thrilling thing to be in the room with. We're all human, but we all we come at this in so many ways, and nobody needs to hear from me. I've done my blue sets full of garbage. I'm like, we need one of those. Give me a call. And,
right. Okay, so let's bring our students in.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
We have students. We have a design challenge.
Okay.
Where are they? Let's bring them back in.
There's
So
one.
all of you
Guys.
Alrighty. Okay, so you guys all remember the challenge. You've all risen to the challenge. So I don't know how you guys, I don't know if you talked about in Zoom how you want to present this today, but the floor is yours. No pressure.
Okay,
I'm gonna call on
I
Chloe.
can go first,
Yeah, go ahead, do
I
it.
guess. So when you said it was like their relaxing getaway, my mind immediately went to like ballet performers
Amazing.
because they're so graceful, and like sometimes I just want to like fall asleep during their performance. But like that's what I thought of, and sometimes they look very like out of this world.
Yeah, totally.
So I came up with like kind of a costume situation where their skirt was like the jellyfish, and then the rest of them was like, I don't know, them.
Yeah.
But so the skirt would like go out.
Mhm.
And then ribbons would come down, maybe like some that are like swirly.
Mm-hmm.
You know how jellyfish do.
Totally.
Yeah.
Great. And is light involved in this at all? Do you imagine them being like lit in a particular way or something? Or
I think they would be lit with blue, and then their costume would be like pink.
Mhm.
So it would be like contrasting.
totally.
Kind
Great.
of.
And do you imagine so you've got like as I'm imagining, it's so hard with the camera. I'm imagining the skirt right here. It's a skirt, right, which is like the jellyfish, and then you have the person in the middle of it. Is the person the same color as the skirt, or are they different colors?
So I was imagining them like kind of as like a jellyfish character.
Uh-huh.
So their like leotard part would also be pink, and they would be like the jellyfish, you know?
Yeah, totally. And what about anything on their hair? Anything on their head or something?
I think for the hair it would be very simple.
Mhm.
And like maybe just like pulled back.
Yep.
And then simple makeup too.
Cool. Love it. That's a good idea. Where were you when I was designing SpongeBob SquarePants?
All right, who would like to go next?
I can go next because I've actually something that's kind of, I don't know if it was based off of her design, but it's very similar. I thought of the idea of using a like a hula skirt idea, kind of general idea. And you could throw in like RGB LEDs, which would allow for color changing abilities, and then doing like a wire framing on top.
Yep.
Originally, I thought it was going to be an idea of doing like a bubble, but then trying to figure out where the people's hands would go, especially with a lot of elaborate dancing and potentials for tripping.
Yep.
Led me to doing more of a frame.
Nice. Excellent. I like a skirt. The one thing I would say to both of you, it just is I think my follow-up question would be, as I sort of said to you, Chloe, which is like, think about the person in relationship to the skirt, right? So is the person a continuation of the skirt, or are you like backgrounding them or foregrounding them? And also you have arms, you have feet, you have a head, you have another place. You can totally opt to not put additional stuff there, but that's another surface and another thing to sort of involve the person in. I like that what you're doing is making them be people. And I just want to, just make sure we're sort of making a strong decision about every part of the person.
In my case here, I've got a terrible rendition, but I actually put them inside.
Oh, amazing.
The jellyfish.
Yeah.
Instead
totally.
of
great, like a big bubble around them. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Rig and fly them around the theater too.
Oh,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun.
And probably a pain for the technicians who had to do it.
Hey, we have no budget. We have world. So,
Great. Emily,
John.
So I guess I can go next. So the one that I was designing was I felt that there was nothing more comfortable than, Samantha brought up this point, than a beanie. And he would stuff that beanie probably full of some like how to say this, engulfing material where it like makes it puff, but it's not too heavy on their head and it's not super hot.
Nice.
Because I know that for one, it can be very, very hot when you're on stage with all those lights on you.
Yep.
And the hat and the jellyfish composition would be made of like a holographic vinyl material. So when it's hit with like a certain light, it can be blue, green, purple, pink, so many different colors because jellyfish can be iridescent.
Totally.
And so here's like a small rendition of it.
Oh my God, I love
as best
that.
as possible.
Yeah, that's so good.
With a blue morph suit. So then the person is both in like a thin material so they can move around easily and breathe in it, because they know that heavy costumes is very, very challenging to dance and sing in, and you can get heat stroke from it if you were too hot.
Yeah. That's what they say. But that's great. That's so fun. I love a holograph vinyl. That's so cool. Samantha, what you got?
Well, when you said jellyfish, I first thought of the jellyfish from Shark Tales.
Oh, I don't know what
you know. Interesting. But it's like a hat. Whereas my original, one of my ideas was a beanie, but then I came up with a sled, like the circle snowing sleds.
Yeah.
Putting those as a hat with like ribbon and wires and tulle coming down from the sides.
Great. I love that idea. And what are you imagining a color?
Pink. This jellyfish and SpongeBob are pink, I think.
Classic pink jellyfish. And then are you imagining anything, like, do you see their face or do you not see their face?
See their face.
Like,
it seems easier for the actor.
Got it. So, and is their face made up or body made up, or is it just, do you want to see them, or do you want them to kind of disappear and make the hat the star?
I kind of want them to disappear. I was also playing with the idea of like a morph suit that had chrome in it, so it shifted colors.
Ooh, nice. Ooh, like that. Very cool. Yeah, she had me at shifting colors. That's exciting.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you to the four of you. Love all of those ideas.
I totally love all of those ideas. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to send you guys away. We'll see you guys in a little bit post-show. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you guys jumping in with fun ideas and helping us out. So we do have a couple of viewer questions that I've got for you. Campbell from Portland, Oregon. So he would like to know, do you have any ideas about how to get past kind of like an artist block when you're on a time constraint, like you're in tech or you're trying to get something done on a deadline? How do you work through a block?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say generally I'd say, like, turn inward, like dream with yourself, go, dream and go to Google at the same time. I would say two things. One is don't go inward and try to talk through it with somebody, because find just somebody to just like, okay, this is where I am and this is what I'm trying to figure out. And, because I think sometimes like verbalizing that process will either help you have an idea, or you might just have an idea. The other thing I would say is to just move, depending on how much time you have, to just move away from it. Like, okay, I'm going to put on, System of a Down, and, like, I'm just going to like check out, because sometimes departing away from it will sort of bring you back to it. It's like the thing where you forget somebody's name, and so you're like, just move on to talk about something else, and then usually the thing you forgot will come back to you. So I would say those are my two suggestions. Take a shower would be my third suggestion, because I think literally clear everything up for me, but those are my three suggestions.
Excellent. So the next one that I'm seeing here is, and this actually kind of goes along with one of the final questions that I had for you. When your designs are approved, do you do any of the supervising when your set is being painted? And the part that I'll tag on to that is, I think that, I know that for me, when I got into more towards the end of college, I was surprised by the fact that in the real world, you don't build the set on the stage that you're rehearsing on, because that's what you do in high school and college, right? So can you talk a little bit about the process of, once a scenic vendor has a contract to build the scenery, what is your role at that point?
Yeah, I mean, your role is to figure out at what juncture you can interface with the scenery in as complete a way as possible while you still have time to make changes. So sometimes that means that the shop will set the setup in the shop before they break it down and move it to the theater. Or sometimes that means, once they set it up, you have a paint call that's gonna, you can sort of address it in the space. But I think for me, one of the hardest things is learning that every decision, and this is not even in a commercial thing, this is also just in regional theater or something, but those decisions, all the time that you need to make decisions, and you need time to make decisions and to respond things in the space, cost money. And sometimes those things are budgeted in, and sometimes they're not. And you need to know when it is that you can go look at something and say, oh great, maybe this wants to be darker, or I think I need to see this under light. Is there a day, once we have some light on, that I can do, a morning that we can come in and respond to it? So because it does get sort of divorced from the, they're just building it in your, high school theater, and then that everybody rehearses on it or whatever, and then and then it gets taken down. You do have to understand, you have to build it, make sure that time to respond to something is built in. And that's a kind of a, it's not a game, but it's a thing to learn, and it changes depending on what the situation is. Yeah. But yeah, I spend a lot of time with the painter. I mean, that's the kind of final thing, which is you stand, as they're doing it, and they've gone far enough that you have something to respond to, but not so far that it's finished and you can't make changes.
Right. And that is you find that that's something that is negotiated through, it's just conversation with whoever the scenic vendor is about, scheduling shop visits and all of that sort of stuff. It's
yeah, totally. I mean, that's where it starts. Everybody, of course, builds, there's the ideal schedule where that's all built in, and you try to figure out, right. And then, things happen, and then you can't be there, or they get delayed or something. And so it becomes a conversation with a lot of people. But it's an important conversation to have, because you need that time with it to be able to just respond to what you're really seeing.
Yeah, the production schedule, also known as the sheet of lies. And then once the show begins to load into the theater, what is your role as that is happening?
Your role as that is happening is to just sort of be you're making sure that they're doing what it is that you're imagining they were going to do, and if not, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're making a mistake. It sometimes means that you thought something was going to look some way and then sort of doesn't, or isn't fitting in the way that you thought it was going to fit, which happens all the time. Figuring out a way to respond to it, so that you can fix whatever you're sort of sensing is the problem. The other thing to do is to figure out, you start to have to be a good judge of when it's a good time to bring the director in to look at it. When it's finished enough, again, that they're not what is this?
What am I looking at?
Yeah. But also they can really respond to it, and you have time to react to those responses, because the first day of them seeing that, you're really at that point, you're it's can sometimes be really nerve-wracking, because you're well, I hope this is exactly what they were imagining. You're kind of protecting this vision of theirs, and just making sure it's going the way you were imagining.
That can be challenging, trying to figure out it, as I'm thinking about it. I've worked with a number of directors for long enough, and creative directors that will come up to me and ask, "Are you ready for notes? Is this ready for me to comment?" Yeah. And I appreciate that, because I want someone to see something when I am fine with them, when I like it,
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, this is where we're going. At least it's not complete, but it's where we're going.
Yeah.
And because otherwise the notes don't mean anything. They're sort of worthless.
I do a thing which I'm sure is irritating to a lot of people, but for me, I have to get, if there's a lot of layers or there's a lot of even just like dressing or detail, I really like to at least get, if I can't get the whole thing done, I like to get like a sliver of it done.
Oh, okay.
So that I'm not saying to the director, okay, so imagine, this, and this, and like my list of things that I'm asking them to imagine isn't enormous. I can point to a part of the set and say, see that? Do you like that? That's where we're going.
Right.
And then they can say, then you can agree on a thing. You have a thing you can bring the light up on, and then you can say, look, it's gonna take a week. It's good. We'll get there. But being able to have a section that it's for myself too, which is like, am I going in the right? Are we going in the right place?
It's a good gut check, right? Well, and that I would imagine part of that's gotten a little easier too now with being able to just like, you're in the shop and you can take a picture of something and then either send it to them or share it later. And
most shops in a commercial setting, what happens mostly, this doesn't happen all the time, but some shops are better at it than others. But they'll do like if not daily, but they'll do a like progress report website. So they'll just say like, hey, new things are up on the website, and you can just check in to your show and see the whatever unit they're in the middle of and stuff.
Yeah. Picture comes up, it's like, ooh, what is that?
That happens. Flurry of nervous emails.
Right.
But it's good. It's good to get that stuff early. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. So we do have one final viewer question. And it looks like, and I'm not sure I completely understand the question because I'm getting these via a chat window. But essentially it looks like, is there a teacher or Allie wants to know, is there any type of, is there like an audition process for set designers, or is it more about, or is the equivalent, a portfolio and meeting, et cetera, like
that's
getting your first gig.
It's an interview, and so yes, there is, it happens, especially now. It happens on kind of two levels, which is the sort of general, like the cattle call is sending directors to your website or whatever, so they can sort of just kind of learn about who you are, and then there's usually an interview which has to do with, are you a good fit for the material? Are you interested in the material? Are you interested in working with them if it's a new person? Is the producer comfortable with your take on the material? Whatever the circumstances of the job are. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's always a sort of, not always, but there's often an interview process.
Well, and I love that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, sure, you're being hired to, provide a set, but you're also being hired to be a sounding board and a set of eyes and a real collaborator, as opposed to a waiter. It's like, oh, you need to set. I can do that. I'll be back with your set in 15 minutes. That's
and to your point, and I know we're sort of running out of time, but I think the kind of waiter thing in a way is like that's, in my experience, directors don't want you to do what they're asking for. Like that starts to scare them, because then what that means is that you're not, they're going to say, I want, I'm imagining this, or I'm imagining this, or maybe there's this thing. And if you just bring just that back to them, the fear is that you're not going to sort of take it and lift it. They're not looking at you. The good ones are not looking at you to just turn back the thing that they're imagining, because it's not their job to imagine it.
Right.
It's your job to imagine what they're describing.
Yeah.
And so, you have to listen, you have to do the thing, which is listening and also hearing. Yeah. And those are two different things, and you have to do both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I think that's, oh my gosh, that's a great place to wrap up. I can't even thank you enough. This is
so fun. Thank you.
For another 5 hours. So So thank you so much. We just appreciate it that you take the time to talk to the students and to the educators and to really invest in people who are ultimately going to take our jobs one day, which is awesome.
Please. Wow, I don't know why you would want a job in the theater at this moment. But if you do, you're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, David. We'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So before we go, I wanted to share a couple of resources with you. The first one is this textbook, which looks like it has seen much better days because I had a dog that went after it. So this is Scene Design and Stage Lighting. This is from Orrin Parker and Harvey K. Smith. So this is the fourth edition from like 1980 something. I think the last edition was 1996, but it's really valid as an introduction to scenery design and stage lighting. And you can find it wherever you buy your books, which is hopefully a locally sourced bookstore. And then next, a really good practical is Drawing Scenery for Theater, Film, and Television by Rich Rose. The great thing about this, again, is introductory, and it provides you a really great sense of the basics and how to approach drafting for scenery. All right. So I want to thank you guys for joining in. I want to thank David Zinn again, along with our students and our educators, Randy and Kaz, along with the production crew here at Projects with Jason. We just so tremendously appreciate you taking the time to join us here at the Tech Table, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Hey, it's Jason. If you like what you saw, take a second and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell and follow us on all social media. Thanks for watching.